Interesting. I have a question. About you ever heard of the term Zera Israel? That there's a couple of articles from the Times of Israel.
Uh-huh. All right,
Um,
so for those listening, so Zera Israel is a nice way to say that you have a Jewish father but not a Jewish mother. I mean,
right.
technically, like, you're the seed of Israel, but you're halachically not Jewish, at
Okay.
least
Okay.
by Orthodox standards, because Reform accepts you. Uh-huh.
And I think that you also touched on it that such a person would still have to go through a standard conversion, correct?
Correct.
And the way that I heard it or that I read it in the Times of Israel article is that by extension, the technical term Zera Israel could or should refer to anybody who has Jewish ancestry that they can prove. And if they took certain opinions in applying practical guidance for conversion, they would make conversion a lot easier for people who fit within that term. And so, anyway, in any case,
I'm really against that whole notion.
I know. I'm wondering.
Okay, go ahead. All right.
Let's say if, and this is not me particular. I'm trying to give a concrete example of what I'm talking about. Let's say I, hypothetical person A, had a mother who had a Jewish father, and she
Mhm.
decided to go through the conversion process and convert. Would that automatically make her children halakhically Jewish by her going through a valid conversion?
No, no, the kids would have to convert. You mean
Like
kids
what
that she already has, or kids that she's going to have in the future?
did she already? Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. Is what's the difference?
That's just the procedure. The procedure is that any kids that she already has that were born to her when she wasn't Jewish remain Gentiles, and they have to convert. I mean, you could convert a baby. That's just the way it is. There isn't anything metaphysical about the whole conversion process. The bulk of it is rabbinic. Technically, for women, the whole thing is rabbinic in terms of having to go to the mikvah and bring a korban, bring a sacrifice, and go to the baptismal pool or whatever. It has nothing to do with someone's relationship with God. It could sound wacky and still be applicable because it's a man-made law. The notion that someone has to go to the mikvah to convert is man-made. Now, the Rambam disagrees on that point. The Rambam ties it into them having to wash their clothes before Har Sinai. Fine. Like, other people disagree. And for sure, the notion of a korban is rabbinic, that you have to bring a sacrifice. In Torah times, it seems that people just entered. I mean, really, how you enter nowadays. How do you enter a covenant with God? By deciding to keep Torah and walk in his ways. That's it. Now, how do you enter halachically the Jewish people? Through a halachic conversion, because the whole civil status of being a citizen and being liable of the punishments of the court is something that the court decides how it's done. But this really describes something that I don't think I've mentioned before in any of my lectures on what holiness really means. And I think this is how the Rambam brings it down. That the difference is that a baby born after the mother is already Jewish is a baby conceived in holiness. Now, what does that mean? Is this bringing some sort of metaphysical dimension to the discussion? Not at all. The notion of holiness always meant separation. In this case, it would be a baby that was conceived and born once the mother or the parents already made that decision to change their behavior and start walking in the ways of God, placing a separation between the holy future versus one's pagan past. But besides that, it's the procedure, but one shouldn't over-mystify it.
What's the deal with Jeff Epstein getting buried in a Jewish cemetery?
I didn't know he was buried in the Jewish cemetery, but it doesn't surprise me. So nowadays, there's a misconception. The whole notion of being buried in the Jewish cemetery is because of the statement that the righteous should not be buried alongside the wicked. So some genius in the Jewish world translated that to mean that if you have a Jewish mother, that gives you the right to be buried next to rabbis and next to Jews, no matter if you kept Shabbat or not. And this is really the rise of Kabbalah. The rise of Kabbalah basically believes that every Jew is special and is on that level, even though they're atheists, just because their soul is special. But in Talmudic times, they wouldn't bury some heretic in the same area where they buried Torah-keeping individuals. Yes, but nowadays they make no distinction. If you're Jewish, if you have a Jewish mother, they'll bury you next to, heck, I don't know, some big Torah scholar. I mean, honestly, today it's really gotten quite silly. Not just how they view Jewish burial, but mainly how they ignore the actual halachot regarding the whole procedure. So yeah, Back then, a secular Jew really had the status of a Gentile. But the thing is, the Jewish cemetery system has really become like a mafia. But at least historically, every community actually had their own little burial plot because of this notion of being buried with the righteous. The understanding was that if you belong to one synagogue and not to another, you could in some way be assured to be buried alongside righteous individuals because they think like you do, i.e. they go to the same synagogue. So throughout Europe and throughout America, every synagogue had their own Jewish cemetery. Now, is it important to be buried in a Jewish cemetery? Well, it's important to be buried alongside religious people. I mean, that's the halakha. Is that what is done nowadays? No.
That's wild. They won't bury Messianic Jews, but they'll bury Jeffrey Epstein, who is...
He wasn't a pedophile. Pedophilia, it refers to prepubescent, not underage. From a Torah perspective, he wasn't really doing anything wrong, technically. I mean, when it was all consensual, like, and these women were...
Where does the Torah sanction that you could marry underage children?
You mean like under 12?
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, the age of accountability is not even specifically laid out in the Torah. 12 or 13 or whatever is not.
Well, nature sort of tells you slightly that a woman is able to get pregnant after 12. She starts to menstruate in and around that time. It's technically not when they turn 12 or 13. It's really with signs of maturity, specifically pubic hair and all that jazz. But people have been getting married at the age of 13 and even 12. It's happened. Now, clearly, consummating a marriage with someone who's 12, even I think the Rambam talks about this, is really frowned upon, because what you're going to end up doing is possibly killing your child, because you can't pull a baby out of a 12-year-old without using these huge forceps that destroy the baby's head.
My goodness.
But I'm pretty sure that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't having sex with 12-year-olds. I mean, it was 16, 17.
14-year-olds in there.
I'm not defending the guy, okay, but for sure he wasn't Muhammad marrying a 9-year-old. They're like the Midrashim teach that Yitzhak met Rebecca when she was also around that age. The news twists everything. Come on, man. Have you been to high schools nowadays? I mean, these women, you can't tell how old they are. Okay?
I know.
At least from a halakhic perspective, they're not children. They're making it sound like he was raping children. 15, 16-year-old runaway who smokes weed. I don't really have such an opinion on it, but for sure, I don't consider it pedophilia, because it really makes pedophilia mean nothing then. There's guys out there who are really crazy in the head, who are attracted to infants.